It seems like this is the invisible plague. I was just taking an inventory the other day of the wicked problems, the sorts of problems that there's no easy fix to that are plaguing our society. And as I look at each of these wicked problems, what is the source of those problems? And a major source for each of those issues is the breakdown of the family. That family structure has been the building block of civilization for the last 6,000 years. And our 21st century society in the United States, we're dismantling it. And we think that we can dismantle it without consequences.
Good morning, Sandy.
Good morning, Tammy. It's so good to be here with you.
It's very nice. I looked through some of your accomplishments last night, so we have lots to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm still very, very interested in the women of the Bible.
Okay.
And what we can do to help people to learn about them and to change their behavior to what works best. That's what I'm hoping for. So I'll just briefly say that you are an accomplished person. Sandy is the Robert H. Grundy Chair, of Bible Studies at Westmont College in Santa Barbara, California. How's Santa Barbara, California?
It's very sunny.
It is it? That's nice.
Yeah, it's very sunny. It's quite lovely. I am natively from the East Coast and mostly from New England. So I've been waiting for, 6-7 years for fall to come. And it
Right.
hasn't come yet. Yeah.
So it's just the same all the time, is it? Kind of just the same all the time? A little bit of rain in the winter?
Yeah, once you've been here long enough, you detect the differences of the seasons. But the first year, it just seems like eternal summer. And then as you tune in, you realize that fall is the dry of the dry season. And that's why we have fire season. That was a new one for me.
Yeah.
That starts in like late October. And if the rains come early, then fire season's not bad. But if the rains delay until late January or so, we can be in trouble.
I see.
Then the rainy season, February, March, which is my favorite season.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're back to summer.
Oh, yeah. Well, that sounds like about the right amount of inclement weather to me. Coming from a place that had winter from Halloween, it was winter by Halloween, and it was summer by June. Wow. It was a lot of winter. We used to like to open the swimming pool the long weekend in May, and sometimes we had to get in the pool and throw chunks of ice out of the pool. That's how far north I'm from. It's crazy.
That Canada?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's Canada, almost Northwest Territories. It's ridiculously far north. But, I guess my parents and my husband's parents, because we grew up in the same town, they were adventurous, They went to when I was maybe 10, they had their 50th anniversary. That's how old the town was.
Wow.
Yeah, a real prairie town. It was new. And we had we didn't call them, we called them Frontier Days. We had a weekend where it was Frontier Days, where we'd put on our little cowboy outfits and go downtown and watch the parade, Yeah.
And was it warm enough to watch the parade, or did you stand
It was
there?
in the summertime. Okay. It was sunny all the time because we had almost midnight sun, right? So you could take a picture outside at midnight without a flash.
That sounds really beautiful to me.
It is. It's absolutely beautiful. And in the winter, the sky is yellow and purple in the morning. It's a different color than it is in the summer. Because, I'm in Arizona, where it's the sunsets are gorgeous and the sunrises are gorgeous, but they're predictable. They look like sunrises and sunsets.
Yes.
But in northern Alberta, even we would drive sometimes in the winter from Fairview to Edmonton, which was a 6-hour drive. And the sky would be this kind of very pale yellow and purple the whole way. So even the color is different. I guess it must be all the ice crystals in the air, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, it was quite an adventure to live up there. I was ready to leave by the time I was 12.
Well, with what you're describing, by the time you were 12, you had already had a lifetime of overcast. So
yeah. Well, although Alberta is sunny like Arizona.
Oh, okay.
It is. And the cactuses are this big. Like, it's really very much like Arizona, but we have winter and Arizona has summer, the hot summer. And our summers were actually like an Arizona winter.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And don't you have burrowing owls up there? Is that true?
I don't know if we have burrowing owls. My father-in-law was really into owls. He was really into wildlife, but owls was one of the things that he was very interested in. I bet my husband would know because he grew up with his dad and he would know that. But I don't know. We had tiny little red squirrels. I think you have those in California, do you?
We have some red squirrels, but they're not, I wouldn't say they're tiny.
Oh, they're pretty small in northern Alberta. And I hadn't seen a big black squirrel until I went to Ontario. And you said you grew up in New England.
Well, my dad was military, so I grew up everywhere. But I spent a lot of my adulthood in New England. And so that is probably the climate that I'm most acclimated to. And then we spent 4 or 5 years in the Chicago suburbs. And Chicago knows how to have a winter.
Yes, and that's very close to Toronto. So that's where my kids grew up.
Yeah.
So what brought you from there to the West Coast? Why did you move?
Westmont College. So
okay.
I was teaching at Wheaton College, and my family was very happy in Wheaton. We gutted our house. We thought we were there for a lifetime. And Westmont actually recruited me for their endowed chair in biblical studies. And
how long ago was that?
7.5 years.
7.5 years, yeah.
And to your point of interest, in my field, there are very few women in endowed chairs. That business of being a senior scholar as a woman is still, there's only a handful of us. So when Westmont came calling and they were super interested in me, it was an opportunity they really felt I couldn't say no to. And we've enjoyed it very much, but it was the opportunity. It was the job description that brought me here. It wasn't Santa Barbara.
Right. Now, you're married. Do you have kids?
Yes, I am. I'm married.
How did you manage that? How did you manage this level of accomplishment and also be married and have kids? How did you navigate that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for thinking that I am accomplished. That's a great compliment. There's always that voice inside my head constantly, that I haven't done enough. Kind of like the Hamilton musical. When it's over, have I done enough? So honestly, it's been quite a scramble. And it's been quite a scramble because I have a very high view of marriage and I have a very high view of motherhood. And I am not that person who dropped my child off at daycare at 7 a.m. and picked them up at 7 p.m. I am that person who has edited manuscripts at the McDonald's Playland. I am that person who was up at 3 a.m. finishing for a deadline and then up at 6 a.m. to, get my kids off to school. So as I'm going to anticipate, this business of having two full-time jobs that you are passionately committed to and won't compromise on either one makes for some pretty frayed edges. But that would be the answer. Working really hard, figuring out what to say no to. I think that, I know that if I were male and I had a wife and kids, as opposed to female and had a wife and kids, at least in my generation, there would be a lot more publications out there with my name on them.
Right.
And I also would have kept a much kinder schedule than I have over the course of these years.
Right. And so what does your husband do?
Well, my husband is an academic, but in his later years at this point, he is no longer working in academia. He's actually working with a senior living facility that's just a mile from our house, and is really enjoying his job. It's hard for two academics to sort out their career paths.
It must be, yes.
Yeah. And he is trained as a comparative theologian. He's got a slew of publications himself. His undergrad was at one of the UMass institutions up in Massachusetts. He actually trained as a musician, which is interesting.
What kind of musician?
Well, he had a rock and roll band.
Oh, no way. Oh, good for him.
Well, yeah, he's literally a rock star.
Oh, cool.
So he did that for his first 20 years or so, had a major faith experience in his late 20s, and shifted careers, went to seminary at Gordon-Conwell, then did comparative religions at Harvard Divinity, and then did his PhD in the UK.
Did you meet at Harvard University?
We actually met at Gordon-Conwell. We were both graduates by the time we met.
Oh, okay.
And we courted during our Harvard years. And he wasn't planning on doing elevated education. And he was just so talented that I and his bestie were like, how do we get you to pursue this? And the answer is that I received a dissertation completion grant from Harvard University, and I gave it to him.
Oh, you could do that.
Yeah, basically, I retrieved the money, and then we put the money down on his THM at the Divinity School.
Oh.
So that's how we did that.
Oh, wow.
And
well, you do what you have to do, don't you?
You do.
You do what you have to do. That's the adventure of it all.
Yeah. And it is really interesting to me, Tammy, and I don't know if you've seen this, but I'm watching the generation of female academics coming up behind me, many of whom I trained. And they have maternity leave and paternity leave, and you know, they're offered all sorts of grants and scholarship opportunities because they're seen as a minority that the academy wants to support. And I was in the classroom teaching 2 weeks to the day from delivering my second child because there was no maternity leave. And my TA actually had to carry my laptop for me because I wasn't allowed to carry my own bag yet. And although I'm grateful for these changes in the academy, I also sometimes go, man, I think I'm just a little bit jealous here of the support and the encourament.
It's funny though, like how many people are having babies now though, compared to how many babies were having babies when we were young.
Well, I know so many female academics who had to choose between marriage and family or their career. And so in the early part of my career, almost every woman I worked with was single. And they looked at my life with that same twinge of jealousy that I look at the younger academics. And granted, I was scrambling and
but you have the energy to scramble when you're young, you know. I don't have that energy anymore, really. to scramble like I did. I look at my son's wife and I look at my daughter and I think, oh, that looks tiring.
Yeah. It's true.
They're energized by it. They're energized. They're both, my son's wife, she's opening a cafe. She's about to give birth to her third baby in
Oh my gosh.
February.
Congratulations.
Isn't that wild?
Yes.
Yeah. And my daughter, she's also pregnant with her third baby, and she's opened Peterson Academy and is launching this big educational platform. And she, at the beginning, she was, because her little guy is now just about a year. And she was struggling with the fact that she wanted to work, She wanted to work, but then she thought, I need to spend more time, and so, but finally she just kind of gave that up and said, you know what? I like to work. Everything seems to be going all right. Everybody's happy. Everybody seems to be progressing in a reasonable manner. I just won't second guess it anymore. I'll just,
go for it.
So good. So but there, you have to have a conversation with yourself.
Yeah. And because something's got to give, right? There's only so much of us to go around. And I heard this quotation many years ago. It was from Golda Meir. Golda Meir, the first prime minister of the modern state of Israel. And I think it was Ben Gurion who said that she was the only real man on his cabinet. I love this woman. But she has a quote about working women. And this is decades ago, right? She said, if you are a working mother, while you're at home, you're plagued with thoughts of of what's going on at the office, and am I going to keep the to-do list, and the pressures there. And when you're at the office, you are tormented by what's going on at home, and am I giving enough to my children? And she's 120% correct.
That's right.
That's the space we live in. And I see society reforming around me to be more supportive. I'm grateful for that. But I also think that we as a society really struggle to value the domestic realm. We really struggle.
Yes, that's for sure. And the problem is that family and community are very suffering. Are suffering, and a lot of that, it goes back to the family. Back to the family and who's there, who's at home.
I was just taking an inventory the other day of the wicked problems, as an ethicist would call them, the sorts of problems that there's no easy fix to that are plaguing our society. I'm thinking about homelessness, addiction, anxiety, suicide, the foster care system, which is a disaster, right? And as I look at each of these wicked problems, what is the source of those problems? And a major source for each of those issues is the breakdown of the family.
Right.
And when you move back into traditional societies, so even though a very contemporary society, I'm thinking about Saudi Arabia and Dubai, and I mean, goodness gracious, they're contemporary, but the structure of their society is what an anthropologist would call traditional and tribal. They don't have homelessness. Why don't they have homelessness? Because it would shame the extended family to allow a member of their family to live in a cardboard box in an alley. And they're not going to let that happen. And as I look, and I'm not saying that Saudi Arabia has all the answers. What I'm saying is that family structure, especially as an ancient historian, which ultimately is what I am, that family structure has been the building block of civilization for the last 6,000 years. And our 21st century society in the United States, we're dismantling it. And we think that we can dismantle it without consequences. And every time we dismantle one aspect of the building block of the family, the state steps in and tries to remedy it.
Right.
And as all of us are reminded come, March 15th, when it's time to start putting our taxes together and we have to interact with the IRS, the federal government is not the most efficient organization out there. And especially when it comes to nurturing and maintaining family systems. Yeah. And it seems like this is the invisible plague that is dismantling, plaguing our society.
Yeah, well, where we give up responsibility, the state swoops in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we know how much responsibility we've given up by how powerful the state becomes. So
that's a really good point.
Right? We have to be aware of that and then just look at our own lives and see what we're doing in terms of responsibility to our families and our communities and our civic duty and all of that.
Mm-hmm. And who in the world has time to take care of their community and their local government at this point in time?
Yeah.
And not many people. And the burden of volunteerism, which again is an essential part of a healthy community, falls on the stay-at-home moms, who have sacrificed their own career paths for the sake of their family. And then they're also providing just vast amounts of volunteerism, certainly in the churches, in the community organizations, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you think you could have stayed home with your kids full time at all?
We went through a season where we took a post where we were both employed. Mm-hmm. Steve and I were both full-time faculty members. And I asked, it was an inner city seminary. They were struggling on a lot of fronts. They could not match my salary package by any stretch. So what I asked them to do was to give me time in exchange for the salary package. So I essentially dropped to 2/3 half-time. Mm-hmm. And that became a season where I had a lot more time to do the mom thing. Mm-hmm. I was scrambling again, but, I got to coach my kids' soccer teams. Mm-hmm. I got to be a lot more available to the schools. Personally, yes, I could have. But would I have maintained any credibility in the academy doing that? No.
So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to ARC in February. There's an ARC conference, and I've asked for a room for a seminar for one day. And I'm going to get a number of women together there, and we're going to discuss a timeline for young women. Because I think that we haven't been as forthright in our discussion about what has to happen to have a fulfilling life. Mm-hmm. We've been pretty insistent on the beating the drum for career.
Yes.
And have just left family to
your spare time
happen. Yeah. To happen when it happens. But that's not a plan. That's not a plan, so it's not likely to be successful. So we're hoping that we can identify something for something that will put in line something that seems possible and maybe even desirable.
Mm-hmm. And flourishing as opposed to scrambling.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Because we've been left on our own so much now, really since the sexual revolution began. We've been just left on our own to figure all of this out. And it was hard enough to be a mother and to have a career and then also be left to figure it all out ourselves. Like that was too much. It's no wonder things have gone all wonky.
Well, one of the things that frustrates me about feminism is that much of the feminist movement has done the exact same thing that a male-dominated society has done toward women. And that is that a male-dominated society that simply doesn't even know, let alone have empathy for the challenges of marriage, childbirth, and child rearing. The feminist movement did not value marriage, childbirth, and child rearing. And so both pressures on the women of the last century have been to devalue at best and actually discard at worst those so beautiful, valuable, and essential tasks that only women can accomplish. And my generation was just get in there and scramble, as opposed to what you're proposing, which is, okay, young women, both of these aspects of your life are tremendously valuable to you, to your husband, to your society. So how do we figure out how to map your life so that you can thrive accomplishing both of these? And then, of course, the next step is going to be raising men and raising a community and a society that equally values both of those aspects of a woman's contribution.
Well, we have to value boys. And
yes.
And that is also very lacking in our education system. And that doesn't bode well for, treating men in a respectful manner. And so, yes, we have a lot to do. We have a lot to do.
And I would argue, back to our earlier point, that both with raising boys and with creating a society that values the domestic space, this is all about valuing the family unit, respecting the family unit, supporting and defending the family unit. And our society doesn't do that. No, that's right. So so that is open now. It's open for people to take up that torch because it's been left behind. So the thing for us to do then is to say, okay, let's take this and nurture it and, put down the seeds and nurture it and have it grow and become stronger and fruitful. Yeah. So anyway, this is the vision. Yes.
So this is the vision. And
I love it.
I want to talk about, you have a study titled The Epic of Eden, Deborah, Unlikely Heroes, and the Book of Judges.
Yes.
So tell us about the Book of Judges to start. Most people don't read that. What would you say were 3 things we should walk away with if we were going to talk about Judges?
Judges. And let me back up one step if I can and let your audience know that Epic of Eden is a series of Bible studies, so that when you're buying the book, you're also buying a streaming guide that offers you 8 of my lectures on the topic. So it's you're actually buying a study guide that assists you and your group, whatever it might be, to move through the book of Judges and Deborah. And we've got 6 of them out. A 7th will be released this year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And these are all coming out of one of my deep commitments, which is giving my academic study of the Bible to the church. So, putting the cookies on a lower shelf and not dumbing it down. This is one of my pet peeves about ministry to the church, that we distill the biblical message to 1 or 2 or 3 moralisms, and and typically it's moral therapeutic deism, and we just keep offering that to the church over and over and over again, as though the people in the church weren't doctors and lawyers and engineers with elevated degrees and wanted to actually understand the Bible. So that's the series. So back to your question. The book of Judges is a really dark book. Most people don't read it, and they don't read it because it reports probably the most morally and politically corrupt era of Israel's history. And it starts very positively with Joshua handing the conquered territories over to the 12 tribes of Israel. He says, okay, I've done my job. I'm tired. I'm heading back to my inherited territory. This is the promise of Abraham. All of you 12 tribal leaders, take these promises and go possess the land. Go team. And as long as you keep the covenant, Yahweh will fight for you and you will succeed. That's how it starts. But very quickly, we find that as the great leader chosen by Yahweh passes on, that the people start drifting. And the drifting in the book of Judges, the emphasis is on them following after Elohim Acharim, other gods. You'll hear that over and over again. So they compromise their commitments to Yahweh. As a result, as promised in the covenant, Yahweh sends them a foreign oppressor. That foreign oppressor starts winning their God-given territory from them. And then the people of God wake up, realize that they have failed. They repent, they cry out for help. God sends them a judge. We call them a judge. They're a charismatic military leader who also defends and enforces the covenant. So they're both military and legislative. That judge steps in, wins the day, musters the volunteer army, and the people live in peace for a season. That cycle that I've just rehearsed is going to be repeated 12 times in the book of Judges. Now, we recognize that as a biblical number, right? 3, 7, 10, 12, 40, 12 tribes, 12 cycles. These have been chosen by the narrator to demonstrate the cycle. It's not an exhaustive treatment of this period of history. But with these 12 cycles, we see that Israel goes through this exact same cycle 12 stinking times. And by the time we get to the 12th cycle, you and I are getting so frustrated with the people of God, right? And then we look in the mirror. Yes, and we realize that the people of God of this generation haven't changed much. And we start getting, convicted ourselves. Well, let me add on to that not only 12 cycles, but each of these cycles drops Israel another level. So that by the time we get to the very end of the book, as I know you know, some of the most horrific stories in the biblical text are recorded. And over again, it is women that are the target of this horrific societal behavior. And by the time we bounce to the very end of the book, the narrator looks us in the eye and says, in this period of Israel's history, every man did what was right in his own eyes because there was no king in Israel. And we have reached a period where the Israelites are worse than the Canaanites. And what is God going to do with his people? So very, very dark book. And what should you walk away with? You should walk away with historically, this is the settlement period. And the great question on everyone's mind is Israel going to succeed? Are the promises of Abraham going to come to fruition? Or is their own personal wandering going to result in the collapse of the great dream that we've been following since Adam and Eve first heard God's redemptive voice? So that's one question. The other question, or the other topic or core issue that a student should walk away with is this cycle that is not only repeated in Israel's story. I will argue before I'm done that it's repeated in our story as the church. And then the third thing I would say is that over and over again, God selects unlikely heroes. That's why the subtitle, to step up, recognize that the people of God are in trouble, and rally the people of God to trigger a new revival and a new wave of obedience to the covenant that changes the trajectory of redemptive history. And one of the things I will hammer away at in the curriculum is, are you that person? Are you that person? And I ask this question as I move through the curriculum over and over. My producer wanted me to ask it every single time, which is, what territory can you see from where you're standing that you know belongs to the kingdom of God, and yet for some reason is not yet in the hands of God's people? Question 2, is that territory worth fighting for? And question 3, what are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm. Good. That's a good story.
Thank you.
It is. It's a good story. It sounds like to me, it talks of a quest.
Mm.
So there's a quest there. There is some humility in seeing something you've never seen before, right? And then there's the responsibility, the courage to respond, I guess, and then the responsibility to do so.
Yeah.
Knowing the responsibility to do so. So that's a good story.
That what you've just tagged, a lot of people have asked me what personally really struck me about working through the creation of this study. And one of the things that definitely strikes me is the uncommon courage of the heroes throughout this entire epic. Because Deborah, as we are well aware, is a woman leading in a profoundly traditional and patriarchal society. So there is uncommon courage that she is willing to step up and take those responsibilities and believe that God will assist her in the task, believe in herself and believe in the God behind her. Barak, who is I think he is a weathered, seasoned clan commander up north. And for him to respond to not only a female judge, but to a call from his God that is an impossible quest. He is going to stand as a clan commander of 10,000 of a volunteer militia against the seasoned forces of a professional army. He's going to die. Unless Yahweh shows up, it's all over. And then Jael, oh my gosh, talk about uncommon courage. So I think this entire narrative is riddled with unlikely heroes. So Tammy, one of the things you tagged in there was a topic that really strikes me personally about the study of Deborah, Barak, and Jael, and that's this concept of uncommon courage. Every one of those characters is standing in a space that is deeply uncomfortable for them personally. For Deborah, she is a woman in a man's world. You know, you and I are talking about having been young career women in the midst of a much more male world when we were younger. Well, oh my goodness, Deborah is standing in a completely traditional patriarchal society, and she leads this country for over 40 years. For her to have the confidence in herself and in her God to claim her calling and step forward is enormous. Then we talk about Barak, who is a clan commander up north. The man directs a volunteer militia in the hill country of Israel. You know, if we're thinking William Wallace and the story of the Highland clans in Scotland resisting the British Empire, I think we've got a pretty good image of who Barak is. And he has got the uncommon courage to hear Deborah's war oracle and say, all right, yes, ma'am. If our God is telling me through you that I will gather my volunteer militia of 10,000 men and stand down the professional army of Sisera and his 900 iron-fitted chariots, okay, if you say so, I'll do it. But the man knows he's charging into certain death. And then Jael, oh my goodness, she is a complete and utter outsider. She's a pastoralist in an agricultural world. Her husband is a turncoat. She is not even fully Israelite. And when the opposing army's commander shows up on her front doorstep, She pulls out her cast iron frying pan and she decks the guy. It's awesome. And in each of these scenarios, I'm challenged as a person of faith. Where am I willing to step forward? In my career, am I willing to challenge status quo for the sake of the kingdom? As a commander, am I willing to call my followers into what looks like certain death unless Yahweh shows up? And as a domestic person, this is JL, am I willing to use the tool in my hand to challenge the enemy of the kingdom and build my community? These are fabulous narratives for each of us to apply to our own lives.
Yes. What a story that is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure glad you went through it.
Thank you.
To tell us that. And I'm looking forward to watching your lectures, as well as the Bible study. So this will be an 8-session video Bible study when it's finished, right? And you have 6 stories so far.
Yeah. And it is finished. It dropped in late August, so it's available to your audience right now. So sometimes people are confused at what they're purchasing. But yes, if you get the book, the streaming code is in the front cover, and you can do it individually. You can do it with a group. And HarperCollins, just to give them a shout out, they really have done a fabulous job producing these these lectures and making them visually and orally and in every other way engaging.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And of course they try to make me look decent too, which I'm grateful for. There's nothing like someone else doing your hair and makeup in the morning. So
that's right. That's right. Yeah. That's also awesome, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you decided to do this, that you've gone to this part of the Bible and found it the most compelling. I guess, you have been persevering in your career, and who knows what you've been up against, that you had to draw courage from God to attain, and continue to do that, I imagine. But why this part of the Bible? Or how did you come to this part of the Bible? What happened that got you there?
Yeah, that's a great question. My technical expertise is in Deuteronomy and the Deuteromistic history, which are even hard to say, let alone study. But Judges is a part of the Deuteromistic history, but it has never been a strong academic focus for me. What brought me here were my students. And every year, one way or another, I teach a version of Intro to Old Testament. That's what professors do. And I have taught Intro to Old Testament to doctoral students, to seminarians, and to undergrads. And at this point, it's primarily undergrads. And when I get to the book of Judges and I show them the cycle and I tell them about those last stories, about forgive me, but the gang rape of the Levite's concubine that leaves her dead on the doorstep, and his callous response to this reality, their eyes are as big as plates, partly because I teach in a Christian liberal arts college, so most of them, not all of them, have some background in biblical education, but no one has ever told them that story before. So first of all, they're stunned that that story is in the Bible. Second of all, they're stunned that these are the people of God and that the great villain is himself a Levite, of the tribe of the priests. Where did this come from? And then when I turn it and I say, and what about us? What about our generation of the people of God? They are just stunned into silence. So going through that exercise every semester, I'm like, okay, I want to put that material in the hands of the regular person sitting in the pew. And then out of all of the judges, because of course there are 12, right? Because we've got 12 cycles. Deborah just sort of captured my heart. And I would be happy to study any one of the 12. And honestly, if you do the study, The bonus day is taking you through a judge that we're not studying, so you can get all 12 of them down. But Deborah gets probably the most press of any single judge in the book because she's got the prose telling of her story in chapter 4. And if your audience has done much Bible study, they know that ancient literature is not emotional. You have to provide the emotions yourself. Ancient literature is a just the facts, ma'am kind of presentation. But then we move into the epic poem of Judges 5, which first of all is just beautiful. If you've read Beowulf, if you like Shakespeare, oh my gosh, it's going to slay you. But on top of that, it is this emotive presentation of the same story. So it fills in all of those gaps. And being a nerd biblical studies person as well, it's one of the oldest pieces of Israelite poetry we have in the Bible. So I'm down on all fronts, right? And it might have pushed me over the edge. I don't know if it did, but it definitely captured my attention. Have you seen the first release of Wonder Woman with Gal Gadot as the star of Wonder Woman? Have you seen?
Now, is this the old movie or a new movie?
It's newer, as in it's not.
I don't think I've seen it yet.
Okay, you have to see it. And This is why you have to see it. The very first couple of scenes of the movie are when Wonder Woman is being raised on the island of the Amazons. And the producers managed to find themselves 50, 60, 45, 50-year-old women who are absolute bosses in their physical capacity. They're cage fighters and Olympians and CrossFit trainers. And they assembled this squad of women, covered their tats during hair and makeup, and transformed them into the Amazon army. And I am looking at that demographic of women who never show up in Hollywood, who are flying through the air, releasing power bows with 3 arrows, launching off of shields. And I'm like, yes, that's what my soul wants to do. So that was part of it as I was thinking about ancient female warriors. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, right. There's a lot of inspiration in the Bible.
Yes.
That's what it's for. It's to inspire us to take up our cross and go forward, right? That it's to inspire us. And so there is some female inspiration.
Absolutely. And speaking to that point, the Bible is often criticized that it is not, it does not front more of its women. But can I say, as an ancient historian, an ancient theologian, the fact that the Bible fronts any women at all is profoundly countercultural. So the fact that Deborah has her place in the cycle of the 12 is this just raging statement to the ancient world that a woman can lead, that a woman can be called and empowered of the Holy Spirit. And the fact that she is ordering around the men of Israel, that she holds the judge's chair and the prophet's office for over 50 years, is just a very significant declaration of women being equally able to be called and deployed for the kingdom. So this is, for our world, a very important feminist declaration that women are equal image bearers in the ancient world.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But as you say, this is something for God-fearing people.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have your intention correct.
Yes. Yes, because she is being called to be empowered and deployed by the Holy Spirit. She's not just being called and deployed because she's female. She's being called and deployed because she's got the gifts. And as I will harp on in the study, she said yes. And how many of us hear the whispering of the Holy Spirit and we don't have the courage to say yes?
That's what happened to me. That's what happened to me. I was very sick, and I was told I had only a few months left to live. And I thought, okay. My mom died young. So did all her siblings. Maybe I'm one of my ancestors, that's just happened to me now. But I went home to tell my son. And when I told him and I saw his love reflected back to me, I felt my doubt and my cynicism leave my shoulders, and I felt filled with the Holy Spirit. And I told my son that only God knows when I'm going to die, and that we would accept whatever help came our way with gratitude.
Wow.
But that we didn't have to take that death, we didn't have to take that sentence seriously, because that wasn't from God. So, but I had prayed when I was sick that if I survived, I would speak publicly. So doing what I'm doing now is because of that encounter, for sure.
That is a very powerful story.
And it didn't happen to me until I was nearly 60.
Wow.
I was a very headstrong young woman. But, wow. You can't say why, right? You just can't. You can't ask why. You just have to say yes, like you said. You just have to say yes. Yeah.
And then have the faith to believe that he's going to show up
again.
Yeah,
because he definitely showed up then.
Thank you.
But I think so. If I am careful and I try to have the proper intentions, I see the fact of my guidance showing up all the time, which gives me then more conviction to say yes.
The next time.
Yeah. Right.
It's interesting you would say that, because one of the things I do in this study is that I take the cycle of the book of Judges and I overlay the cycle of revival in the church. And the church does have a life cycle, and all the church historians would recognize it and declare it. And I use Garth Rozel's work. He was the church historian at Gordon-Conwell. And the fact, especially within the Protestant denominations, you can see it very clearly, but you certainly can see it with the Reformation and the Catholic Church as well, that the church's natural inclination is to drift into stasis, right? And it's not just the church, it's our individual faith lives, it's our educational institutions, our parachurch organizations. Mission drift is what a business person calls it. And for the church, if she is not interrupted every generation with revival, the church will wander off into that same death cycle that is apparent in the book of Judges. And so it is the task of the individual believers, the people who are willing to speak up, to disrupt the cycle. And to disrupt the cycle with revival and reconnection and a refocus on the covenant and what is expected of the people of God. But of course, when you disrupt, the status quo doesn't like to be disrupted.
No, it's hard work.
Yeah, and people don't like being disrupted. And you wind up being named, rather than an evangelist and a savior, as these judges were, you wind up being named just a disruptor and a troublemaker. And we look at the story of Martin Luther and the 95 Theses, and we look at the story of John and Charles Wesley in the Anglican Church, and we look at the story of the National Holiness Association and the Methodist Church. And in each of these cases, the folks that actually brought life back to the organization were targeted and persecuted, and in some cases actually martyred for the investment they made in the people of God.
Yeah, well, I think that's something that has to be a conversation too. How far are you willing to go in the service of what's best? How far are you willing to go? And you have to have that conversation, at least with yourself, if not with your loved ones. And and come to a consensus so that you have the support that you need from yourself and from those around you, that this is worthwhile, no matter what. No matter what. And I think we're at a time in our history that we have to at least pose that question. If it comes to us, to pose that question. Yeah.
Important words.
Well, thank you very much, my dear.
Thank you.
I hope we come near you soon, and then we can see one another. That'd be fun.
That would be lovely. Yes. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for being interested in my work.
So interesting. So interesting. Thank you very much. Yes, the more I can speak about, if you have any ideas of who else I should speak to about the women in the Bible, and not just the women in the Bible, but just inspirational work that people are doing in terms of God's work, I'm interested.
Well, I can make one recommendation while we're here, actually, which is Jennifer Powell McNutt, who was my colleague at Wheaton College, has just put out a book called The Mary We Forgot. It's all about Mary Magdalene. And we just hosted her as an Erasmus lecturer at Westmont College. And what she demonstrates throughout church history is how Mary, who is the first a prophet of the resurrection, has been sidelined into this backwater space of a prostitute that Jesus didn't want touching him, as opposed to a devoted disciple who's the only one courageous enough to stand at the tomb and whom he commissions to go back and tell the 12 that the resurrection has occurred. I think that would be a great conversation for you.
Oh, yes, I'd like that. Would you put us in touch?
Yes, I will do that.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Yes, thanks very much.
You're
welcome. Have a great day. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.
Take care.